Welcome to the season premiere of year season 13 of Prairie Pulse. I'm Matt O'Lean, sitting in for John Harris. My guest today is someone I've known for a long time, and he's achieved a great deal. Rear Admiral Stuart Munch with the United States Navy is here. Welcome, Admiral.
Oh, thank you very much, Matt.
Thanks
Great
for
to
being
be here with you.
Before we get started about a lot of the things, I know you want to talk about Navy Week in Fargo, which is what you're here for as we're taping. Just tell us, folks, about your background, where you're from originally, how you got involved, and you know, really why you chose the Navy as your career.
Sure. Well, I grew up in a series of 4 towns in North Dakota. My parents were both educators and ended up in Oaks, where I went to junior high and high school, and I now consider that home. While I was there, I developed an interest in service academies, and at the time, Annapolis seemed to offer the most opportunities. And so I put that first in my applications and was fortunate to be accepted. And then I went off there and had different choices for career choices in the Navy. And you have to remember back then the Cold War was still going. And the submarine force is where the action really was. And that was the hardest thing to do as well, so that was very appealing, and that's what I ended up doing.
Yeah. Take me back, we'll get into Navy Week in a minute, but like in high school, you were great ahead of me at Oaks, and of course we all are proud of what you've achieved, but take me back to high school. I remember when you started kind of applying to Annapolis, and that's the hard thing to do, isn't it? Tell me about that process, and really what was that decision? Because you know, you could have went to a lot of colleges with your grades and everything, but what really got you on that kick to try to get into Annapolis, and then tell us about the process to get in, because it's not easy.
Sure. Well, actually the seed goes back to when I was in junior high, and my father mentioned one time he had done one enlistment in the Navy that his supervisors thought he might be interested, and then discovered he was too old. And so he mentioned that story to me one time when I was in junior high, and that was the spark that I then followed on. So I was pretty intent about going to a service academy when I was in high school. And they look for a well-rounded person, more than just the grades. So I was very active in athletics and other activities while I was there, leadership opportunities. And so the application looks for those items in particular for the type of person they're looking for. So you fill out an application to the Naval Academy, and then in parallel you also apply for an appointment from your elected officials. So you can apply to both senators and then the representative for your area. And here in North Dakota, traditionally those 3 will get together and have a combined board, and then they pick their nominees for those of the Naval Academy who confirm they meet the minimum requirements, and then the Academy will issue the appointments. And
just if I can toot Oaks' horn for a bit, we had 2 in 2 years, because Mike Mathias went to West Point, and he was a grade behind me, and he's had a wonderful career there as well. So, but it is hard to get in, and I know you had a great career. I want to talk about your career in a minute, but I want to get to Navy Week, because that's really why, as we're taping this, you're here in Fargo for Fargo Navy Week. What is that, and why are you here? And tell us about some of the activities.
Sure. So the Navy does 12 weeks around the country, and we select areas where there's generally strong support for the armed forces, and also an area where the Navy is not perhaps well as understood as the other branches. So here in the middle of the continent is a perfect place to appear, and the Fargo-Moorhead region, of course, has always been strong for the armed forces. So we'll spend a week here talking about the Navy, explaining the Navy, also a number of exhibits for people to observe, participate, kids events, showing off some of the technology that we have. The band is here to provide music, and then of course the Blue Angels here on the weekend.
Yeah, tell us about some of these robotics and things that kids can participate in, and what you're doing and where you're going with that.
Sure, there's a couple primary activities. One involves robots, so our explosive ordnance disposal teams, the bomb squads if you will, use these to check out suspicious packages, very similar to police forces around the country now. And so they'll have those here to exhibit, and then they have some miniature versions of those for the kids to actually operate.
Wow.
And then we have a virtual reality display, and involving navigation in the undersea environment. And the kids really like that because it's sort of close to gaming, but it's an actual simulator that we use for training.
How has the Navy changed over the years, Admiral? Because, I mean, you've been on nuclear subs, you've commanded one, we'll get to that in a few minutes, but a lot of changes technologically since, you know, you and I growing up watching World War II movies about the Navy. I mean, it's amazing, the technology, right?
Yes, I would actually say not only technology, but the people and then the operations that we conduct. So technology first. Things, of course, have advanced along with the rest of everyday life with microprocessors and computers and everything that we do. And that really has enabled us to become that much better with the missions that we conduct. The people have actually gotten better than what we used to have. With the all-volunteer force, when I started, was still fairly new. Now it's mainstream for what we do. And it's quite extraordinary, the people that we attract. Only about 25% of high school graduates actually meet the minimum criteria for being in the armed forces, for being physically fit and the academic aptitude and free of disciplinary problems. And so we really do get the best of America. And then operationally, of course, when I started, as I mentioned, it was in the Cold War. And it's now different. We're around the world and we're focusing on many different hotspots.
And what are the differences? When you started, you said, like I said, it was Cold War, so Soviet Union was still kind of the focus. Tell me about that, and then kind of take me through your career as well with your commands and things like that.
Sure. So when I started, the Soviet Union really was the singular focus of the United States Navy and the potential for warfare with them. And so when the wall fell in Berlin, things changed pretty markedly and very quickly. And we became more diffuse in what we did, looking all around the world, patrolling the seas to maintain the sea lanes free for shipping, and then being available whenever the hot spots would develop. And of course, then we had the Gulf War in '91, and then continued presence there, maintaining stability. And now we're in an era where really it's a multi-pronged threat that we're concerned about around the world. We have concerns with Russia, with what they've done in the Ukraine and where they might be headed with that. Concerns with China and a very rapid military buildup and some coercion in the South China Sea and where they're headed with that. The Iranians and the potential for developing nuclear weapons and long-range missiles, same with the North Koreans. And then this long-term terrorist threat and where that might be going. So it's really a multi-dimensional problem like we haven't dealt with before.
And how does the Navy fit into that, Admiral Munch? Because I think the general public tends to think of, Navy SEALs and the Marines and this kind of thing and ground troops. That tends to be what politically people talk about, boots on the ground, this and that.
Right.
Should we commit boots on the ground to fight ISIS, etc.? But what is the Navy's role, say, in the Middle East or the South China Sea or things like that, up in the Korean Peninsula?
Sure. So about 1/3 of the Navy is deployed overseas at any one time. And that's to all those areas that we just talked about. So by maintaining a continuous presence in the area, it does two things. One is it deters any potential foe from committing aggression. And on the flip side of that, it assures allies and friends that we're there to maintain stability. And so we're on the front lines. And if anything starts to go awry, we're usually the first ones to respond. Ships, submarines, aircraft, SEALs.
Take off from ships, etc.
Exactly.
Right?
And because we're based in international waters, we really have wide range of the earth. And we can operate from the seas and go ashore if we need to. And so we often say those aircraft carriers are really 4 acres of sovereign U.S. territory.
Right. Let them know we're there, right?
Exactly.
Tell me about your career. When you first came out of the Navy, where were you assigned? I know eventually, people are very interested that you commanded a nuclear submarine, of course. Just take me through your career, where it took you and the various commands.
Sure. I did a couple of odd things. So your viewers should understand this is not the normal path to do things. But I went straight into graduate education after the Naval Academy and was very fortunate to be over at Oxford University in the UK. And then it was time for me to play catch up with my peers. So I did a ballistic missile submarine that carries the nuclear tipped missiles that provides our nation strategic deterrence. And then I rolled straight into a fast attack submarine with deployments out in the Western Pacific. And then I went to an aircraft carrier, another unusual thing, and did deployment with them to the Arabian Gulf. And then I was XO of a submarine out of Hawaii with more operations in the Western Pacific and the Arabian Gulf. And then finally went ashore. Usually we don't spend that much time at sea. Mm-hmm. And I was at the Pacific Command, which is headquartered there in Hawaii. And while there, I applied for a White House fellowship and was accepted. And so I went off from there and spent a year in the White House, another unusual thing to do. And then I went to command Albuquerque, the fast attack submarine. And that was based out of Groton, Connecticut. And we deployed 2 times, once just in the Atlantic and then another time continuing on to the Arabian Gulf. That's then when I got my first Pentagon tour after that. And it seems like now that's kind of my default place to be when I'm not on a sea tour. And I worked for the Deputy Secretary of Defense as his military assistant, and then I went to the Director of Submarine Warfare after that, which is the Plans and Policy Office, Budget Office for the Submarine Force. And then commanded a squadron of submarines out in Washington State, and then was back to the Pentagon where I headed Navy strategy for a year, and then was selected to become an admiral. And so I was back in the Submarine Warfare Office for 2 years. And then out in Japan for 2 years, where I commanded all our deployed submarines in the Western Pacific and in the Central Command in the Arabian Gulf area. And now I'm back in the Pentagon, and again, back working for the Deputy Secretary of Defense.
Very impressive. What's it like to be deployed for a long period of time on a sub? That must be really, we've seen movies about it, but what is that like? That's got to be stressful for some people, I would think, but what's it like to be in command of something like that?
It's sort of the ultimate command in the Navy,
right.
Because you're out there alone without a lot of communications, and it's really quite a bit of responsibility to give an officer at the commander level to execute national policy and really be on his own. So it's very rewarding, and our operations on fast attack submarines, which I've done primarily, are in very forward operating areas. We're continuous gathering intelligence in peacetime, and of course are ready with our weapons if we go into combat. The longest we'll go is really limited by our food on board, and that's 90 days as a standard loadout of food. Personally, I've done 76 days. To a degree, it can be a little bit like Groundhog Day for parts of the crew that are doing the same thing every day. Because they don't all understand or are allowed to know the operations that we're doing. But those of us that are doing the operations every day is exciting.
Is it something you get used to, being away from your family that long? I'm always curious about that. Is there claustrophobia? Is that something you're used to by the time you get command of something like that? Take me through the mental strain, I guess.
Yeah, it's actually not that big a deal.
Okay.
Everybody's
it sounds like it is to me, or the layman, but yeah.
Everybody's in the submarine force as a volunteer. So those that might have issues tend to self-select out and do something else. And then if you start doing it when you're young, it's just sort of what you grow up with then. So everybody does like to get out in the sun when we're done. And the young sailors now, the other priority is to get on a Wi-Fi net and get connected again with the world.
With the world. Is it tough on the family to be away that long?
It is.
Yeah.
Among the various communities in the Navy, the submarine force is really known for close-knit families and strong support for one another. And that's really necessary with the business that we do.
You told me before we started recording you really liked your time in Japan. Why is that?
I did. It's a wonderful country. The people unfailingly are gracious and polite and go out of their way to assist you in any way that might be helpful. And it's a very orderly society as well. Everything's very clean, no petty theft, and everything's very punctual there. Everything happens right when it's scheduled to happen. So it's really just a pleasure to live there and get to know them.
With Navy Week, as we're here, is that really a chance for you guys to sell the Navy to people too? This is what a Navy career is like. It's kind of a PR thing for you guys as well. Tell me about that. Maybe reaching maybe that kid who might choose the Navy as a career.
Yes, we do spend time explaining that. So it's an opportunity to see the world and go on deployments, things that you might not be able to do here in North Dakota. It's an opportunity to pick up additional skill sets. Most of what we do involves very high levels of technology, both mechanical systems, electronics, computers, and then we also, in a very short period of time relative to regular life, do a lot in the way of leadership. And so people who just do one enlistment in the Navy come away as great leaders as well. And then it's also a way to obtain a very good education without much expense. So With the GI, you do one enlistment and then you qualify for the GI Bill. And for all state universities, that pays tuition and gives you a housing allowance. So it's quite a way to walk away with additional skill sets, leadership, a full education, and be debt-free.
So while you're here, will you visit some schools as well?
I will, yes. I'll be meeting with the, schools are out in the summer
Yep.
here, but I'll be meeting
Right.
with the superintendents in the
Okay.
area, and then the university presidents.
And I know the Chief of Naval Reserve is with you this week as well. She's here. Tell me about her and what she's up to, and what is the Naval Reserve actually too. So just tell me about that, and I know she's going to be here as well this week.
Sure. The Naval Reserve is a component of the Navy where those individuals are in a status where they drill once per month and then spend a 2-week period on active duty in the course of the year. They belong to units that are dedicated to specific missions. So when I was in Japan, I had a reserve unit assigned to me that specialized in planning and operations. And so they would help us plan events that we were conducting at sea. And then when we did large exercises, they would fly over to Japan and help man my operations center. And then we use them whenever there are periods of conflict, when we need to call upon additional manpower.
Kind of like the National Guard.
Exactly, and they come on active duty and assist us with that. And they all have normal careers where they're doing something else, and so that's also a source of special skills for the Navy. One of the individuals helping us here with Navy Week lives here in Fargo, a Navy captain, works in the IT field, and his Navy specialty is in public affairs. And so, but he brings that IT skill also when he comes on active duty and works with the Navy.
And again, I think the Chief of Naval Reserve.
And she's going to be
as
here.
well, right? Tell us
yeah.
about her.
She's going to be here on Friday and Saturday. So she works in the Pentagon like I do, but travels around a lot more than I do, visiting the different reserve centers. And she's helping celebrate the centennial of the Naval Reserve, which is this year.
And I understand there's a lot of Navy reservists in Fargo. That's what kind of my information told me. A lot of in North Dakota too.
Right. There's the headquarters for the Reserve of North Dakota is here in the Fargo area, and there are a few dozen reservists right here in the Fargo area, and then a few hundred across the state. And then there are several hundred veterans that have retired here in the state from the Navy.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the USS North Dakota and that commissioning, because we had Bob Weefald on the show, and I know you were here a while ago and you were on our radio show. Tell us about that commissioning and how Bob got it. He was really the spearhead, and why it was named North Dakota.
Yeah, so speaking of naval reservists, Bob
Yes.
is a naval reservist, and for about 20 years he worked the system, if you will, to get a submarine named after North Dakota, which is a decision made by a Secretary of the Navy. So it's quite a passion he had, and it's tremendous for the state that he was able to bring it about. So USS North Dakota was commissioned in October, so that means it was placed into service by the Navy. It'll have a lifespan of about 33 years, and it was the first of a new flight of fast attack submarines and has some special capabilities. Most notably, it has a couple of large diameter tubes that are up in the bow, the forward part of the submarine. And those can be used as basically canisters to launch Tomahawk submarines, or large undersea unmanned vehicles, or Navy Special Forces, the SEALs. Or it's something maybe we don't know yet we need, but it's a space where we can operate things from. Submarines tend to be a bit larger than people think that haven't been around them. USS North Dakota is 377 feet long, from the front end to the back end, so that's longer than a football field, and has a crew of about 140 people.
And where is it right now?
Right now it is deployed overseas
Okay.
On a classified mission,
Can't
and
tell us
I
that,
have
right?
to leave it at that.
Right.
But they're doing great work, I know that.
I'm sure they are. And maybe you can't answer this, were you ever in a situation in your career where things got dicey in terms of, or is that something you can't talk about, with other countries or another sub in the area, that kind of thing, just like you talk about, a forward area. That can get pretty stressful.
Yeah, anytime you spend a career in doing something that is this complex and operating in forward areas, things, you're going to run into circumstances that are stressful, and I certainly have been through that. Fortunately, they all turned out well. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here as admiral on active duty. Most of those are all classified missions, as you might imagine. So it's a little difficult to talk about those. But a lot of exciting things go on.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about your pistol shooting, because that was something you really got into at Annapolis, and you went to the Olympics. Tell us about that.
Well, I didn't go to the Olympics.
I didn't. Okay,
I tried out
almost. Okay, sorry.
But that was just one of those unusual things. Track was my best sport when I was in high school, and I thought maybe when I went to the Naval Academy I could do that. And I discovered that in my class alone at the Naval Academy were 4 state champion milers, and not from small states. I think it was South Carolina, Michigan, and Florida or New York. So big states.
Yeah.
So a little limited opportunity. Well, anyway, all the midshipmen receive pistol training while they're there, small arms
And they
training.
like you to try a sport, right? Isn't that part of it? You have to, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the training turned out well, and I thought, well, maybe I'll give that a hand. And it turned out I just had a natural affinity for that. And they have a very strong program at the Naval Academy. When I was there, they were in the midst of what ultimately became 11 consecutive national championships for the school. And while I was there, we experienced one loss my sophomore year, first match of the season, and we won everything else the rest of my time there. And that was the beginning of what became the longest win streak of any sport in Naval Academy history. 57 consecutive wins. So on par with Bison football.
There you go, yeah. Is that pretty intense, those competitions? And must be pretty intense, huh?
They are.
A lot of training, yeah.
Yeah. And it's a lot of mental training, which makes it a little bit of a different sport compared to the others. And you'll often find that the best shooters are a little bit older because they're more experienced. So you'd mentioned the Olympics. Usually the 2 oldest Olympians are actually the 2 pistol shooters on the team. Sure. So back when I was just finished my junior year, I was invited to the Olympic trials, and we made a good showing, but didn't make the team.
We've got 3 or 4 minutes left here in our show. Why is the Navy still important in today's world?
It's vital because, again, we're out there on the front lines with the presence of the United States. We're deterring conflict, and should conflict win, we're ready to. Should conflict occur, we're ready to win. And that is, again, assuring to the allies. And so that helps prevent arms races as well by being present. And we also keep the sea lanes of communication open. So about 80% of the nation's economic activity actually is transported over the oceans. And in past years, there's been piracy in the area of the Gulf of Aden off Somalia that had great effect on merchant traffic. And then we brought in the Navy, and in cooperation with other nations, we stabilized that. And so things that are bulk goods are very dependent on shipping by sea. And that's important to this region because that's how agricultural products get shipped overseas. And so the livelihood of many people around here is ultimately dependent on the security provided by the Navy.
Do we still have the best Navy in the world?
We do.
No question.
Yeah, hands down.
Okay. I know there's been some chit chat. I know, you work in the Pentagon. You're close to the political arena out there. There's been some talk about, I know, some Army budget cuts coming. Any periphery there with the Navy that your guys are paying attention to, or possible cuts coming, or how's that going with the budget process?
Well, I work in the office that oversees the entire DoD budget.
Okay, so you know something about
which
this.
is in debate right now.
Yes,
so
it is.
I can't talk about it.
But they've been on Capitol Hill talking about this.
Yeah.
So
we
are there places to cut, or or there's we can't cut too much, of course, because we need the Navy out there. But just say what you can say.
At this point, all cuts are difficult. Yes. The easy choices were made a long time ago, much appreciate the support of the American public and the taxpayer and what they do for the armed forces, and in return, we think we're a good investment for them for security and stability for the country. And our leaders are working hard on the issue in conjunction with Congress, and ultimately trying to do the right thing for the American people.
Yeah. In the few minutes we have left, just a quick question too about what's the biggest misconception you think the public has about the Navy or a naval career? And that's part of the education process that you're here to do.
Probably not familiar with what a career looks like.
Yeah.
And the fact that you alternate between sea duty and shore duty. So you'd be assigned to a ship or a submarine, and typically 3-4 years at a time. and then you'll have a shore duty that's 2 or 3 years long. And so that balances the time you're away from home and the time that you do get to be at home with family continuously. And while you're at home, you're building up your skill sets, learning new things, oftentimes college education for the enlisted force, graduate degrees for the officers, and get yourself ready again for another sea tour.
Okay. About 20 seconds left. If people are interested in a naval career or finding out about the Navy, where's the best place they can go? Is there a website or a office in Fargo?
Sure.
Yeah.
NavyOutreach.org is a great website to go to, and then the Naval District for recruiting this area is in Minneapolis.
Okay.
Just Google the Navy and you'll find it.
All right. Admiral, thanks for being here. Good seeing you again.
Okay, thank you very much, Matt.
Rear Admiral Stuart Munch with the United States Navy has been my guest, and that's all for our first show of Prairie Pulse for this season. Thanks for watching. See you next week.
Funded by the members of Prairie Public.